are live. This is Mike Wall. Welcome back to another episode of the Agent Revolution podcast presented by Mike Wall Live, the place where we deconstruct the biggest challenges facing today's real estate agents so that they can build a sustainable, profitable, but most of all, fulfilling real estate business. It's good to be back because I'm joined by my friend, real estate coach, Jim Rimley, and we are going to show you how to build a badass business plan for 2021. And I know most of you are hopefully having a good year in 2020. And the reason why we are doing this now is because if you wait till the end of the year, then you're carrying your 2020 business plan into 2021. You don't want to do that. We don't want to relive 2020, right? We don't want any of that. But before we do, don't forget, you can always get more free real estate coaching over at MikeWallLive.com. So without further ado, Jim, are you ready to rock and roll, my man?
Let's rock it. I'm loving it.
Let's do it, baby. Well, before we get into today's topic, which obviously is business planning, because that's what I just said, let's get a little background on you, my man. Bring us up to speed on how you got into the business. I know we talked briefly before the show. You're at your 31st year, so I'm happy. Let's get the quick version of that because we go about 45.
Yeah. We'll make it short.
Yeah.
So I got in the business when I was 19, college dropout. My buddy talked me into getting a license. We both studied together. He didn't finish. I finished. And got in the business when I was 19 and struggled for my first 6 months or so. Barely got by, but I kind of started to figure it out after watching a lot of live webinars. We didn't have webinars back then. We called those seminars. So a lot of seminars, a lot of reading books, a lot of tapes, a lot of programs from some of the greats, Tommy Hopkins and, The Art of the Sell and Zig Ziglar and the guys like that. And it really inspired me to go out there and change things, what I was doing. So in my next 12 months, I took 150 listings. I got listed in the top 1% of agents nationwide.
Wow.
And from there, just started winning, a lot of awards from my franchise. I was a C21 agent when I started, wore the gold coat proudly.
Yeah.
And then in 1994, I was 24 years old. I launched my first company. We grew that to 17 offices, sold it in 2006. Luckily, right before the great crash.
Yeah.
Knock on wood. Worked for NAR for 10 years, teaching all the designation programs, wrote a few books, and then I got recruited to come down to Southern Oregon, where I'm at today, and grew a company down here from 39 agents to 190 agents in 3 offices. We're in the top, we're in the Real Trends Top 500, which means we're in one of the top 500 companies in America today. And we're in a population base of 80,000. So we're not in a metro market, but we're competing with companies in LA, Boston, Philadelphia, Chicago, and our agents are out producing a lot of the agents in the country, just getting down to fundamentals and making things happen.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So you guys have really good market share then.
Yeah, we have about 25% market share. We just covered it this morning.
Wow, that's unbelievable, man. That sounds like my man Eric Hatch, who is in South Dakota. I think he's at 20 or 21% market share. He's in a very small market like you are. That's very impressive, man. And I know that we can dig into that a little bit because that's obviously very intriguing. And I know most agents who are watching or listening would be interested to hear more about that. Today's topic is obviously business planning. And if we business plan well, we can take market share, right? And so, as I talked about when I was going through the introduction, now's the time to business plan if you haven't already. I know you're a coach and I know you encourage your students to business plan. You business plan yourself. Tell me a little bit about the importance of business planning.
So, what you don't do what you don't prioritize. Somebody taught me that a long time ago. And so when we look back at your year for 2020 and you say, I wish I would have done this, I should have been doing this. Well, the reality is you didn't do it. And the reason you didn't do it is because you didn't feel like it was a real priority. And the reason why people don't prioritize generally is because you don't truly have clarity on your goals and clarity on what you want. And business planning delivers clarity. If there's one thing that business planning does is it gives you a crystal clear pathway. And if you don't have that crystal clear pathway of where you're trying to go, you're never going to get there. You're just going to walk around in circles. Yeah. And that's what most agents do is they walk in circles and they're just kind of beating their head against the wall because they have no structure to their business. They have no structure to their day. And they wonder why they're not creating success.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the other side of that is that in the real dangerous side really is there are a lot of agents who are having success despite having a business plan or what looks like success, right? Because we're we're in that type of market right now. What's the trap there though?
So here's an interesting trap when you see, we're in a market where a high tide floats all boats, right? You kick over a rock and there's 3 buyers will crawl out of it. You tie an offer to a dog, kick it in the butt, and 2 hours later it'll come back signed over full price, right?
Yeah,
so, I mean, the market is just, what happens is this is a market that covers all sins. And so you can have agents that would never be able to sell their way out of a wet paper bag, but are able to actually create $2 or $3 or $4 or $5 million in production. Yeah. So the reason why we have to be very conscious of that is because here's the ultimate litmus test for agents is, do you have a clear understanding of where your next buyer or seller is coming from? I always ask agents this. Can you tell me, without me telling you, where your next buyer or seller is coming from? If they have no idea, then they're not in control of their business. They don't have a business plan if they're actually intentionally working. They're just hoping and praying to the real estate gods that something will be put in their hands. And that's not a business plan. And the other danger kind of along the same line is there's a ton of agents out there in the market that have gotten in the business in the last 5 years that have never been through a downturn. They have gotten in the business the last 10 years. They've never been through a downturn. They think it's always straight up. It's not always straight up. I've lived through 5 recessions and the Great Recession. There will be a downturn. We're about 12 years into a 7-year cycle right now. Normally the market cycles every 7 years, and not that I'm a doom and gloomer, because I'm not. I think 2021 is going to be an incredible year for us. But eventually the market will cycle, and doing business just this kind of haphazard way won't work anymore. And you put your family at risk. You put yourself at risk when you don't have a plan.
Yeah, man, well said. And I think there's never a bad time to start business planning. You know what I mean? So if you haven't been doing it, don't feel bad. Just start doing it. And I think what you'll see is, even if you are having success in your business right now and you're not business planning, that you're going to have even more success, because like Jim said, you're gonna start to get clarity on your business. And so Jim, for the person that's not business planning at all, and even for the person that is, what do you think is maybe the first step to getting started to building that perfect business plan?
So the first step is to identify how much money you want to make and make it a realistic number. Obviously, if you're just entering the business and saying, I want $1 million in GCI, it's an unrealistic number. So we have to start with saying, what's a realistic number that I'm shooting for, a realistic goal, but one that stretches us too. If I've been in the business 4 or 5 years saying I want to make $50,000 is ridiculous. We should be raising our goal, right? So we find that number, and then it's really a process of math. We're working the numbers backwards. This idea that it's some kind of mystery and mystical, we don't know really what our production should be, is complete crap. We should know what our production should be. And we start with, how much money do we want to make? What's our average commission per transaction? We divide one into the other, and we will know exactly how many transactions we need to close. Once we know how many transactions we need to close, then it's a simple kind of a Y chart. We say it's a reverse Y chart. We say how many are going to come from buyers, how many are going to come from sellers, how many appointments do we need to have, what's our prospecting or our model for achieving those appointments, and we start working our channels. We start working our funnel.
Yeah, and what's really cool about that is, if you've been keeping data for a while, the numbers get easier and easier to put together. And what I mean by that is, for instance, if for every 400 calls you make, you get a sale because you get 40 contacts, 4 appointments. It's easy to say, if I want 5 sales in a month, I need to do X number of calls, because your exact call to closed ratio. And most people starting out, I don't want to overwhelm you. It's not really important right now that you don't know that. It's just about getting something on paper, understanding your market, your average sale price, and then trying to build out a plan to get there. And then it doesn't hurt for you to backfill as you go, if you are keeping up with the number of dials, contacts, and appointments, to really start building that foundation of what the key metrics are going to look like, or we call them, those are leading measures, right? Those leading measures are the really important ones, because lagging measures, when those show up, it's a little too late, right? Lagging measures would be the number of sales you had in a year. And so if your goal was to get to 100 sales in a year and you only got to 50, well, then it's too late, right? But if you know those leading measures, like the number of calls, the number of contacts, the number of appointments, then if you're on or off track to hit that lagging measure, which is the result, which is the number of sales, right?
Yeah, I love it. And really, Jeff Bezos had a great comment about this. Remember, he's the richest guy in the world, so you should listen to a few things he has to say, right? He says that you shouldn't do what you can't measure, right? Don't do what you can't measure. And
Yeah.
the biggest mistake that agents make is not measuring themselves well enough. I mean, when you look at the best and most successful teams in America, the most successful offices in America, they're measuring their dashboard. A lot of people call it their dashboard. They're measuring a lot of key metrics. And to your point, I'll give you one example of that in my office, where we're measuring people that are calling into the office versus the number of appointments set. I mean, that's a super simple metric.
Right.
But when we can look at an agent and say, you received 10 calls inbound, you converted one, that's a 10% closing ratio. What can we do to support you and help you get from a 10% closing ratio to a 20% closing ratio or a 30% closing ratio? Because it seems small in the beginning, but you annualize those results over a 12-month period. It begins to move the needle because you add 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 transactions a year to most agents' bottom line. It makes a massive difference. It's a life-changing difference in their bottom line, but you wouldn't know that unless you're measuring performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you this, man. Why do you think, I hope the folks that watch this, I mean, they're watching it for a reason. It's because they intend to take action. But why do you think people don't take action? You can tell somebody to build a business plan and they don't do it? Why do you think they don't do it?
I think the reason why for most agents is when we get in the real estate business, we want to hang on tight to this idea that we're an independent contractor, which means no one's going to tell me what to do. And when people have that kind of mentality that I'm going to be my own entrepreneur, no one's going to tell me what to do, they take that too far and they become the lowest paid employee. You can be the highest paid employee, the lowest paid employee, and it's all relative to your accountability that you're putting on amongst yourself. But here's a great method for getting around that, a great accountability tool. I always do this kind of in my classes and my coaching. I say, imagine you're going to hire somebody else to do what you want to do with your business. You're going to pay them $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 a year, your goal for what you want to make. What would be your expectations? Would you expect that they have a business plan, number one? Would you expect that they get to work on a certain time every day? Would you expect they dress well, maybe wear a name badge, wear a tie, whatever? Would you expect they have a listing presentation, a buyer presentation, use CRM? Would you have all those expectations, or would you just want them to kind of half-ass it? Just come in and just like, if it happens, it happens, right? Most of us would say, no way, not if I'm writing that guy or gal a check for $400,000 a year. I'm going to ride them like no tomorrow so they get the job done. Yet, we don't have that same expectation for ourselves. We don't hold ourselves to that same high level standard. We think we can come in late, go home early, take 3-week vacations, all the things that agents are notorious for, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it, man. I'm so glad you said that, because I think that will resonate with a lot of people. It's like, if you were going to write somebody a check for $600,000, would you expect they do like these specific things? And the answer is going to be always yes, right? I mean,
right.
Who's going to argue against that? So once you've got it, your business plan, and you understand, kind of what you want to do, you built that roadmap, right? And you know what you need to do. The obvious next step is you take action on it, right? And I don't want to oversimplify this, because, there are a lot of things that still need to be addressed, right? Like if you're doing lead generation, who are you calling? Do you even have leads, right? What are your lead sources? What are your ROI on your lead sources, right? There's so many different things that you can analyze, because there are lead sources where when you call them, you have a much higher conversion ratio than if you call another lead source. So you want to make sure that if you're spending 2 or 3 or 4 hours on the phones, that you're calling the most optimized lead source, so that when you do call that lead source, there's a much higher rate of conversion, right? And when there's a higher rate of conversion to an appointment, there's a higher rate of conversion to contract and contract to close, right? So, and the idea is really not to confuse or overwhelm people, but really just to get you started, right? And so, and Jim was mentioning, the best thing to start with is your overall income goal, right? I know a lot of people will start in our industry, they love to start with units, right? But the reality of it is, there are a lot of people selling a lot of houses, not making a lot of money. So the best thing to do is to figure out, okay, I want to make $100,000. And how many houses do I need to sell to get there, right? And so there's some different metrics that you need to know in order to do that. But really, if you're a single agent operator, it's not real hard, right? It's, basically, it's your operating income, right? So how much money's going out? How much are you paying? It's your cost to sale, right? And then your operating expenses, and then whatever's left over would be your net. And so, for a single agent operator, that may not be a whole heck of a lot of money. Maybe you're paying, obviously you're going to pay money into your brokerage, right? Or if you own a brokerage, then, you've got a whole different set of expenses there.
Right.
And if you have multiple lead sources, you've got to figure out what those are costing you. And then again, what's left over is going to be, what you are ultimately going to be putting in the bank. So, and again, it's not about oversimplifying it, but I think people in our industry, they have a tendency to, they'll say, well, I want to sell 100 houses, or I want to make $100,000, and they don't put anything behind it, and it just becomes kind of while it's a nice, I guess it's a nice visual to look at, that, you paste it up here and it says, I want to sell 100 houses. I guess that's better than not making any business plan at all. But when you do it that way, what do you miss out on, Jim?
Well, there's so many things there. And one of the questions that I'm asking, and I love the way you're drilling into this, is that when I'm sitting and coaching somebody, I'll say, one of my questions is, well, what was your average list price last year? What was your average sales price of the buyer last year? And 99% of the time, they don't know, because they actually haven't gone backward, looked at their business and said, what did I do last year compared to what I want to do this year? So what I'd encourage everybody watching this, if you're an experienced agent, go back and look at your last 12 months of activity, print all your transactions out, figure out your average days on market, figure out your average close price with a seller, average close price with a buyer. Figure out where the genesis of that transaction came from. In other words, what was the lead source, like you're pointing out, Mike? So where did your business come from? And I know that's looking backward, but to look forward and say, okay, my average list price last year was, 282. What is my goal for 2021? I want to raise my game, maybe get to 325.
Yeah.
Now I have a goal I'm shooting for. And as I push these numbers up, and there's strategies around that, we can change our marketing, we can change what we might call our avatar, who we're centering our marketing around, to try to gauge our marketing to a higher end client. Same with list price, same with buyers. We can look at market time. If I have excessive market times, maybe I can work ways to drill down and get better at that. And all those little metrics add to my bottom line at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Another great question mark for a lot of people when you really get deeper into business planning, especially at team levels, brokerage levels, but even at individual levels, is, there's two things that add to your bottom line. It's your top line growth, and then it's your profit growth, right? So some agents get in this habit of having incredible top line growth, but they're spending all this money in their expenses, so they actually net less at the end of the year. At the end of the day, it's all about our net, right? So our operational cost expense is super important to understand. We got to be measuring both and seeing where we're getting the best bang for our buck, like you're saying, ROI. One thing I encourage teams to do is to have what I call an OCE expense, an operational cost expense attached to every transaction. So they take their total, and every agent can do this at an individual level too. Take your total cost of what it costs to run your business. 20 grand for an agent, 30 grand for an agent. For a team, it might be $200,000, $300,000, $400,000. Divide that by your total number of transactions. That's your operational cost per transaction. If I'm running a team, I'm going to say, if I brought in $10,000 GCI, before I pay anybody out, I should be at least thinking about the fact that the operational cost expense, the OCE, should come off of that balance before I pay my split out. Because if I don't do that, the team leader is now covering all the expenses for the team out of their side.
Mm-hmm.
You follow my logic here. So that level of business planning, a lot of team leaders it doesn't even cross their minds. It's not even on the radar to think about that. But those are the kinds of things we've got to be thinking about. At an individual level, even if I'm an individual single solo agent, if I understand my operational cost expense per transaction last year was $1,200, and I make a goal of this year, I want to get that down to $1,000, that creates a higher profit for my business. So I take home more net to my family. All important parts of business planning.
All right. And what goes in that OCE?
So in my opinion, all your cost of operations. So that's what it's costing you to be at your brokerage,
okay,
your marketing costs, your assistant and admin costs, Everything that costs, it costs you. You should understand it at a line by line level, but that's your total cost of operation.
Okay.
What doesn't come out at a team level, though, what doesn't come out at a team level is going to be what you're paying your team people, your team leaders. That comes after that operational cost expense.
So the splits, you're saying the splits with your agents don't
are after.
Okay.
Splits come after. Right. Admin costs go in it though.
Yeah, because like splits are a cost of sale, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
And so and so you would figure that after the fact. So basically, any of your operational cost would go in this number, and then you're saying to divide it out by the number of transactions that you do.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so like if you were going to do 100 transactions and your expenses were, I don't know, $20,000, right? You assign a piece of that $20,000 to every one of those 100 transactions, and then you know what that would be. I guess it would kind of be your net number, but not really after you were paying your agents. But it would definitely give you a clearer picture of what your expectations for your income would be. And your cost of sales never a bad thing usually, because that means you're doing business anyway, right. Which, you can kind of figure out along the way. So, and so typically when you're like, for you yourself, like when do you business plan?
So for me, it's right now. It's November through December. I think it doesn't take a long time to do business planning. A lot of agents get in this kind of mental trap of thinking this is going to take weeks of time and take me like a calculus degree to figure out. It's actually super simple. We use an Excel spreadsheet to help agents kind of go through the basics of it. It's a very simple process. But it's really sitting down for like maybe half a day. I think it's a half a day to a full day of planning where you're taking some quiet time. It's working on your business, not in your business, where you're just going to dive in, and that's what it's going to be. If I'm in a team, I might have a few of my main team people involved in that planning process. If I'm a brokerage, my management team might be involved as well. But really, it's business planning comes down to asking yourself good questions and knowing what questions to ask, right? Yeah. And so it's really going to come down to those top line questions, like how much do I want to make? What's the cost per transaction? What's my average income per transaction? How many listings do I want versus buyers? And we just work those numbers down. The harder part, I will be honest, is here's where most agents fail on their business plan. Most agents that do a business plan, which is a very small amount of agents, by the way, I'd say it's less than 10% of agents, if you're actually drilled into it, have a written business plan. But beyond the written business plan, you got to go deeper. And here's where the magic hits the road, is you've got to have it boiled down to a daily action plan. Because if you don't have a daily action plan, it doesn't matter. You can have all this nebulous high-level stuff you want. It won't matter unless you boiled it down to a very specific action plan that is going to be based on my business plan. I know I've got to call 5 people in my sphere of influence, send 3 thank you cards, talk to 10 people that I've gotten from IDX leads, send out whatever, an bulk email once a month. It's got to be very specifically daily down to it. And then I've got to be honest with myself and be having visual cues in my office that keep me focused on that goal so that I'm actually following through on what my daily commitment has to be. That's the only way you're going to get there.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like you're talking about a calendar, my man.
It is a calendar. You don't do what you don't schedule, right? You don't do what you don't schedule.
Right, yeah, that's exactly right. And so when do you encourage people to get started on their business plan? Do you encourage them January 1?
No. I think if you get that thing written right now and you can dial in the activity base right now, like I know my daily activities, I'd start now. Because that activity base will be higher than it was last year, because we're always trying to push higher. And you'll be running into 2021 instead of kind of just walking and then running in January, which makes no sense. I want to be running now. Right. I want to be full steam ahead right now, especially in the frenzy market that we're in. I mean, we're in a super cycle. I'm calling it a second summer. It's a completely unique market that I've never seen in 31 years. I mean, it's absolutely bananas right now. Yeah. So we cannot just be treating this like, oh, it's a normal fall or winter. It's not, right?
What do you attribute that to, man?
So many things, but I think interest rates at 60-year low is obviously a huge driver, but also combined with low inventory. Low inventory sparking now double-digit appreciation, which is now finally getting people to bring their properties back to market. Yeah. And you've got this huge amount of hunger for inventory, because people have been kind of on the sidelines going into the market for a few years, and now they're suddenly coming back in force.
Yeah.
And you're getting kind of what happens with this is it's like a pond drying up in the middle of the desert. Yeah. And that pond is inventory. And everybody that's been on the fence about buying has been like, I'll just wait. I'm sure it'll come back. And then the pond's got smaller. I'll just wait. I'm sure it'll come back. Pond's got smaller. And suddenly everybody's like, holy crap, I better get a drink before there's nothing left. And everybody's piling into that little bit of water that's left. And we're seeing 20, 30 offers. Today in my office across the hall, we had 17 offers on one house that was like a $250,000 house. My market, we just reviewed these numbers this morning. This is Medford, Oregon. This is a little tiny town in the middle of nowhere. We have less than a month's supply in every price band, including $1 million price band, 0.92 of a month's supply. 350 and lower, it's 0.2 of a month of supply, basically sold out, right? And that's just everywhere, right? It's not just here.
Yeah. To me, that sounds great if I'm a seller. It sounds like hell if I'm a buyer.
It is.
You know what I mean?
It is.
We were just talking about this at our meeting on Monday. It's like poor FHA and VA buyers, they're really struggling right now, man, because people who are conventional or even better coming in with cash, they can kind of do whatever they want. And with I guess with respect to, there's still going to be competitive offers. But, these people that are FHA and VA, I just feel really bad for them because, they really want to buy a house and they just can't compete. Are you guys seeing kind of the same thing with FHA and VA buyers in your market?
Yeah, anybody that is like a first-time home buyer, which is 30 to 40% of the market, that's the millennial market has finally come on, bigger than the baby boom market. They're finally coming in. They're coming in force. Absolutely. Anybody that's under 350 to 500 is struggling to find a house. Yeah. So for us, our strategy around that is we have to get to inventory first. We got to put it in front of our agent body first, right? Yeah. So we are using first look, coming soon kind of strategies, so that our agent body is putting these things in front of our 190 agents. So our agents, our buyers that are working with our agents get first crack, right? And we let our sellers know, hey, we're going to put this to our agent body first. You're cool with that? Yeah, we're cool with that. They sign off. They're cool with that. And now we're putting it out in front just to give our buyers a little bit of an advantage. But, it's a struggle out there for sure.
Do you see seasonality at all playing a part in damaging the market even further as it relates to buyers?
No, so here's what I think on seasonality. I think in a normal market, we would see a slowdown because of fall and winter, the natural. People don't want to slog through the rain and the sleet and snow. But because of the market dynamics, it's changed this year. What I will tell you, more seasonally, it's more of a macro season, is we're in a frenzy season of the market right now, but that will change. And it will change more rapidly than you would expect. And here's what will cause it to change. What's happened is we had a delay in prices. I would have expected us to be in double-digit appreciation much earlier this year based on activity. I would have expected it to hit in July. I would have expected it to hit in August. It actually didn't start hitting in most markets until September, October is when we started to finally see double-digit appreciation again. But we were lagging like 4 or 5% appreciation all the way through the summer, which was kind of crazy to me. Now that you see double-digit appreciation, what will happen is inventory is going to unlock, and you're going to see. It's going to be like somebody's turning the dial up, and it's going to go dial, full blast. Yeah. And what will happen is a ton of inventory will start to hit the market in 2021. It'll saturate some of that demand out, and then we'll start to flip to the other side, which will be interesting. Then sellers will have to get more competitive. It's a market cycle, and that's where you see kind of a macro cycle, a macro season that we're in. Instead of, we're always focused on the micro, the quarter by quarter, but we're going to enter a macro cycle pretty soon.
Yeah. So you just think we're going to push right through winter, and I tend to believe you, man. Oh, yeah. I feel the same way. Something just feels different right now because, like you said, you had a property with 17 offers, and we're going through something similar here in the Cincinnati-Dayton area. And when you see that type of frenzy, that there are 16 other buyers that just missed out on a house, right? Well. Yep. They're not giving up, probably, right? They still need a place to live, or they still want to find a place to live. So the next time somebody lists a property in that price point, those 16 people and whoever else is coming into the market are going to be bidding on it, right? Yeah. And there's just not enough inventory to absorb the demand right now, or to satiate the need that the buyers have. I think it'll continue through the winter. I agree with you wholeheartedly there. Part of me wants to see I want to see. I mean, I love where the market is if I'm representing a seller, right?
Right.
It's very challenging if I'm representing a buyer. I think the pendulum's kind of swung so far in the other direction that it's not necessarily a good market anymore overall, as it relates to, if I'm working with a buyer. I kind of want to see the pendulum come back a little bit more to the center and see a more balanced market. You talked about, and I'd really kick myself if I didn't hit on this a little bit because I'm very curious, but you guys have around a 25% market share there in your small town, which is fantastic. Talk to me a little bit about how you think you achieve that.
I think it comes down to having high expectations for your agent body, number one. When you set an expectation that's high, a lot of times people will rise to the level that you expect them to rise to. And I think the danger for a lot of team leaders and a lot of brokerage owners is that we have low expectations. We see the market as being, the expectation is I should be expecting 4 to 5 transactions a year out of my average agent. And that's poverty level. And agents can't succeed. They can't feed their families. And so what you're counting on there is huge attrition. And you're just trying to create a machine of one person in, one person out, one person in, one person out. That's a horrible business model. And it's a business model that's doomed to failure. And a lot of brokerages fail because of it. My business model is I want to have everybody succeeding at a high level. And I always say we're the LA Lakers of real estate. That dates me, I know, but whatever.
Actually, they're back in, right? LeBron.
They're back in. That's right. They're doing well. So we're trying to create this sense that you're in a superstar group. And whenever I recruit a high level producer, somebody that's doing 20, 30, $40 million dollars, I'll say, you probably are coming from an office where they're patting you on the back all the time, right? And I'll be like, yeah. And you're getting a lot of the awards, right? Oh, yeah, man. I get them all the time. Everybody's telling you how great you are, right? Yeah. And they go like, yeah. Well, when you come to my office, not so much, because you're going to be surrounded by people that are doing very similar or better than that. And so that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing because it's going to push you to a level you didn't think was possible. Instead of doing your 20 or 30 million, we're going to take you to 40, 50, 60, 70 million because you're surrounded by all-stars. When you play better golf, when you're with better golfers, you first set those high expectations. That's number one. Second is I train my staff to treat the agents as their customers. And so this is a super important conversation I have with my staff is I'll say, when I'm hiring somebody, I'll say, what do you think we do at this real estate company? Inevitably, they'll always say, well, I think you sell real estate. And I'll say, you're wrong. We don't actually sell real estate. What we do here at this real estate company is we serve agents who sell real estate. Our customers are the agents, and I need you to treat our agents that way. It totally changes their mindset. And I'll say, you're going to have some of these people that are they're going to be in a bad mood. They're not going to be the most friendly people. It's our job to elevate it, to make them feel good, to over deliver, to give them everything they ever want. Not that we allow abuse, that we make sure everybody's respectful.
Yeah.
But having a great staff support system. And then third is coaching. I mean, we're giving coaching every single day for these agents. And it's, I'm bringing, of course, my coaching, of course, but I also bring in other coaches. I bring in a high-level speaker every year to do a kickoff for our company. We've hired the Buffini Group. We've hired Tom Ferret. We've hired every coach known to man come in here and rally these people, because no matter how good a coach you are, people get sick of hearing you as the leader, right? They want some other voice to come in and say, hey, and basically sometimes say the same things, but in a different voice, and it gets them fired up and riled up. And that's what we do.
Yeah. In your estimation, Jim, and you've been in it for a long time, my man, and you've done it at a very high level. What do you think are the most important characteristics of a successful agent?
99% of, I think, what a successful agent is going to bring to the table has nothing to do with skills. Sometimes I hear it's like, I'm super tech savvy. Doesn't really matter, right? I'm really good at social media. Doesn't really matter. I'm really good at X, Y, Z. I hear these things all the time when I'm talking to people. Really what matters is your attitude, and how your attitude will impact your ability to connect with people. And number one is your attitude about client relationships. Client relationships are by far the most important thing we're involved in. There's a reason why our industry hasn't been disintermediated like travel agents and like some financial industries, because we're still dealing with the largest financial asset of most people's life, right? People want a trusted advisor. And this is what I'm speaking a lot about with a lot of people right now, is this idea of mind share versus market share. So we happen to have great market share. But the reason we have great market share is because we have great mind share. And what mind share means is that in your community, you have to think to yourself, if somebody says the words real estate, what's the first thing that comes to their mind? Like right now, what do they think about when they hear the words real estate? The danger for every single real estate agent in America is that the first thing that people think about is the word Zillow. Because Zillow is at war with our industry to take mind share and thereby take market share. So mind share means they want to be the first person, or the first entity, I should say, that people think of. And if you allow that to happen in your market, you've lost, right? Mm-hmm. Because they're going to take control of lead generation and then sell you the lead and take 35, 40%, 50% of your profit right out of your business, which is their goal, by the way. So we have to rethink it and say how, in a hyper local sense, in my local community, I can't do war with Zillow at scale, but I can certainly do war with Zillow in my market. I can certainly do war with Zillow at a sphere of influence level with the people that know, like, and trust me. And I can take mind share there, and I can dominate the mind share with those people. And when I do, I want to be the first person they think of when they hear that word real estate. That's how you get to 25% market share, is client by client, relationship by relationship.
Yeah, that's great stuff, man. And, as far as like, I've always found that there's three different types of people in our industry. I think there's the seekers, and the seekers are typically the most successful people, right? It doesn't matter what situation you put them in. They're always going to seek out information and be successful despite the situation that, they started in, which would be a situation if they're in a new industry, be it real estate, right? They don't know what they don't know. And so what they're going to go to, they're going to listen to podcasts, they're going to read books, they're going to attend seminars, they're going to watch podcasts like, or watch shows like this, right? And they're going to get the information that they need, right? Yeah. And I think that is a very small group of people. I think the largest group of people is the group of people that they want to be successful. They just aren't, for whatever reason, they're not seekers, but they will, if you put them in the right environment, they will absorb what you give them and they can have some level of success, right? I think that's a very large group of people in our industry. And then there's a third type, which is they don't know and they don't care, right? They're not interested. Even if you give it to them, even if you shove it down their throat, they're going to throw it right back up just because they're not interested. And obviously we don't work with those types of folks, but for folks that are not seekers, for folks that are that if you get them the right information, if you get them in the right environment, they will consume it. What do you see long-term happening to those types of people in our industry? Do you think that there's a sustainable role for those types of people? Or do you think that technology will demand that only experts in our industry will last?
So this is a really interesting conversation, honestly. It's a great question. So here over the last 5 or 10 years, and I'm not picking on Zillow necessarily, but what's happened with a lot of agents is they've allowed themselves to just start writing checks for lead generation, right? And so they've just said, you know what, I can't figure out lead generation, so I'm just going to write a check. I'm just going to have somebody else do it for me. Could be Zillow, could be Realtor.com, could be Homes.com, whatever. And could be Facebook, could be Google. And so now these leads are flowing to them, right? And that's been like their solution for lead gen. But what's happened is a lead bomb has gone off in the industry. The lead bomb that went off was that 5 years ago, there was like maybe 20 million leads being sold for 5 million transactions being done. Last year, there was 200 million leads sold to realtors, still about 5 million transactions being done. So what happens is those leads are complete crap now, right? So you're having to drill through 200 leads to get to one closing, 300 leads to get to one closing.
Yeah.
So these agents that have been surviving based on that, and some teams have built whole business models based on that, it's not working anymore, right? It's falling apart. And what will happen is that whole model will collapse. And to your point, the seekers, which I would say would be people that are looking for other alternatives, they are diving deep into developing their own leads and building relationships. I think those are the winners. I think the people that have wanted to be spoon-fed leads and spoon-fed everything else are not going to survive this. And what's going to shake them out is the next market transition. They'll do okay for the next year or two. As soon as we enter any kind of market transition, you're going to see the great cleansing. I call it the great separation. We saw it during the Great Recession. 50% of the agents went by the wayside. We will see it again. Not a great recession. I don't think that, but I think we'll see a great separation.
Yeah. And you think that's also true for like folks on a team, or do you think they'll be able to last a little bit longer, or maybe even sustain, because that they have systems in place to be able to make it through something like that?
Actually, I think teams are more vulnerable in a lot of ways.
Okay.
I think the reason, because when I talk to teams, and I talk to a lot of teams, I coach a lot of teams, is that a lot of them have built their business around these buyers agents being fed from Zillow or Realtor.com, or a combination of both. Yeah. And that model is not working as well. The buyers in those models, the buyers agents, are getting frustrated and are starting to leave kind of en masse. Yeah. We're starting to see more and more buyers agents say, hey, I'm not closing enough to even feed my family. I'm going to exit and become a solo agent. Yeah. And so that team leader who was relying on these 3 or 4 or 5 buyers agents to give them an extra 25, 30 grand a year from their spread between what they're paying Zillow and what they're making from the agent, now has 5 people leave. That's 150, 200 grand coming off the table. Now it's a sudden shock to their system. Yeah. They may have been using that to fund their admin of their business or different aspects of their business. So here's the winners that will survive it, though. The team leaders that are pivoting now, and a lot of smart ones are, and they're going to a relationship-based, CRM-based strategy. Yeah. And they're taking control of their own leads through Facebook, through Google Ads, and that's going into a funnel that they're in control of. Yeah. That's the ones that are going to win. The other ones that are buying leads are going to have a hard time in the next 5 years. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, man. And that's fortunately how we're set up. Is we have our own CRM, we have control of our own leads, and we really encourage our agents to get out and grow their SOI business and not become completely addicted to the leads that we're feeding them. And that's why we pay them at a higher split, because we encourage them to do their SOI business and build really good business relationships. Or personal relationships, even, in fact, with their past clients. And I think you're right, man. It's those relationships that Zillow would. I don't know if they'd ever be able to break that. It would have to do something miraculous in order to break the bond of a relationship between somebody that's had a really good experience with their agent and their agent. You know what I mean? So. Yeah. I think you're right. I think what you're going to see is, well, obviously the solo agents who are their business is just dependent on lead flow, paid lead flow, they're going to suffer. And then you're right. The teams who are just built around Zillow or Realtor.com, they're really going to suffer too, because, and not only agents, but the team leader is going to suffer because they're squeezing the margins, year over year, and it's going to become harder and harder to stay profitable. And then and what's going to happen is that you're going to have to decrease your splits, and people will leave. And it's just, you're right. I think it will implode on itself. So it is. I think it's important that you prepare for that now. If you're a team leader or even a team member listening to this, make sure you're getting the value that you need from the place that you're at. And, all you team leaders, make sure you're providing that value. And I think one of the things that I'm encouraging is just start doing some A/B testing. I mean, a lot of these team leaders are spending 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 grand a month with Zillow. Crazy. It's just nuts, right? So I'm saying, hey, take 10 grand out of that budget, invest it, try this. Try taking 10 grand and doing a 10,000 piece mailing into the community, measure ROI against what you got out of that $10,000 out of Zillow. I guarantee you the mailing is going to outperform it. There's just no question in my mind. Even at a 1%, it's going to outperform it. Wow. So start doing some A/B testing with all those dollars that you're doing. You will unlock other opportunities that are just sitting out there waiting to be mined. Right. And here's the thing too with Zillow is the fact that, and we used to be a Zillow client, we're not any longer. But if you're buying Zillow leads right now, those are buyer leads, right? And what do we know about buyers right now? Buyers are struggling to find listings, right? Right. So they're selling leads for homes that have already been pending for 30 days sometimes. And so you're paying, whatever, you could be paying a couple $100 a lead for those leads, just depending on what, zip code you have. And potentially, have to disappoint that individual time after time because you can't find them something. And then the reality of it is maybe they go somewhere else because they feel like, they can't win with you. Right.
You just you just have to be cognizant of that when you're paying a lot of money for buyer leads. But we're at about 45 after, man. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have? I know that's the cliche question, but I want to get the best out of my time with you.
Let me give you a tactical piece of information, because there's going to be some people watching that say, this all sounds great, but I don't have an SOI and I need to build one and I don't want to buy leads. So what would I do in this market, right? So let me give you a piece of tactical advice that's been working for a lot of my agents. I call it the narrow casting technique. So we are all out showing properties, right? Most of us. Sure. We're all out writing offers in a lot of cases. So instead of doing the traditional circle marketing around a listing, what I'm encouraging my agents to do is the 5-5-10 technique, which is after a showing occurs, you're out in the field, you show a house, you come back to the office and you call 5 people on either side and 10 people across the street, and you use more of a conversation that's centered on urgency and something that just happened. So my conversation with the seller would be, hey, I just showed your neighbor's home. You probably saw the sign. And they'll say, yeah, I showed your neighbor's home this morning. My buyers loved the house, didn't quite check all the boxes. They really loved the neighborhood more than anything. They asked me to give some of the neighbors a call that live right around there just to see if there's any chance you would ever consider an offer on your property.
Yeah.
And that is unlocking a lot of opportunities, because there's a lot of pent up seller demand, sellers that are on the fence but haven't quite made the decision. And by making those calls, because it's urgent and it's tied to something that just happened, a showing, the conversation's more authentic. It's not awkward. It's real. Right. But more powerful than that is the conversation where you say, I wrote an offer on your neighbor's property. We weren't successful. There were 17 other offers on it, but they want to buy in the neighborhood. Would you consider selling for the right price? That's another great conversation.
That is gold, man.
Yeah. Or if you're the listing agent, you do the same thing. Hey, I just listed your neighbor's house. We had 17 offers on it within 2 days. I've got 16 more buyers in the neighborhood that want this neighborhood. Would you consider selling after you get your top dollar? Yeah. Those are such golden missed opportunities that people are just not taking advantage of, right? Yeah, so tactics work.
That's money. That is really good stuff. Save the best for last for sure, man. Well, Jim, hey, how can people get a hold of you, man, if they have questions about coaching with you or just questions about the market in general?
Yeah, so on the screen, thank you so much for doing it, Mike. We have my website's erealestatecoach.com. So if they hop on there, they're going to see our platform and how it works. And also you can reach out to me through Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. I'm there everywhere. And if you just look up eReal Estate Coach, you're going to see us in all those locations.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, as usual, I love sharing these stories week after week, because this show is literally changing agents' financial lives, my own included. Do me a big favor. If you know someone that might enjoy the podcast, please, please, please share it with them. And if you listen to podcasts, make sure you go to wherever you listen to podcasts and hit that subscribe button. If you like Mr. Jim Rimley's episode today, give us a 5-star review. Don't forget to visit MikeWallLive.com for absolutely free real estate. In fact, we have 8 hours worth of free real estate business training. For Mike Wall, Jim Rimley, we are putting a bow on this one. Jim, thank you so much.
Thank you, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir.